All right, we're here doing a recording, and we're doing it on leadership. I think, and I have my guest pastor here, Rob Terry from Florida. I think, Rob, would probably agree that most people would feel like there's a lack of leadership overall, no matter what sector of life you're talking about. From your experience of the military or being in the ministry, just share some thoughts on what you think are the qualities of being a good leader.
Yeah, thank you. This is just something that I've learned, from the military, from my time on the police force and in ministry. Leadership has to start with the leader being willing to do what he's asking others to do. Any kind of leader that just kind of tells people what to do and is not willing to kind of get in the trenches himself is someone that I firmly believe people are not going to follow. Even Matthew 20:28, Jesus says, "I came to serve and not be served. I give myself as a ransom for many." So he models that for us. And honestly, for me, that's exactly what I've tried to do with pretty much every avenue that God's placed me in. Yeah.
And you're exactly right, and I would say that from my experiences, a leader does have followers. A leader makes things happen. They have a vision. But a leader's different from a dictator, or somebody that constantly has to micromanage. But your experience with the jobs you do now, what are some of the qualities of being a leader that you see a positive effect on other people?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. Another thing that I've learned is there's a big difference between a boss and a leader. And so I have a leader who models what it means to be a servant. And so what I've seen is that if we're willing to bring other people in and cast that vision, and then if we show that to them, they'll grab a hold of the vision, then all of a sudden they start to own it themselves. And one thing that I've learned is that when people own that vision that you cast out, they're going to be willing to give everything they have for it.
In a general way, there's leaders and there's followers.
Mm-hmm.
A leader or somebody that's going to be a good example. Jesus talked a lot about discipleship making. From your perspective, how does a leader train somebody else to become a leader?
Yeah. Once again, you have to be willing to do what you're asking others to do. You have to believe in your vision. You can't just cast it. You have to believe in the vision, and you've got to be willing to get out there. And you may not always have the followers or the volunteers even that are going to come straight to you. You've got to be willing to go to them and talk to them and invest time with them. Discipleship is key. You've got to be willing to go to them and talk to them and love on them. That's a big thing with leadership too, is they have to know that the person that they're following truly loves them and cares for them as well.
I want to draw on your military experience or the
Sure.
secular jobs that you had.
Yeah.
Because the Bible talks about, Peter and Paul both said, obey your employers, whether it's easy to do it if they're good, but if they're tough to get along with, you still do it as an example. But either in military or your secular jobs, did you see leaders that were both positive and negative, and what was their effect on those that were under their leadership?
Yeah, for sure. Even recently in the past year and a half, I've had, and what I would consider that big difference between a boss and a leader, I've had a boss who was almost like a micromanager and didn't trust the people to do the job that they were hired or told to do, what they were supposed to do. And honestly, it wears down your spirit. It really does. And so if you are a leader or if you're someone in charge of others out there, I encourage you to trust the people that you have brought on. You brought them on for a reason. God placed them with you for a reason. Trust them. And I've also listed, I've had great leaders who said, "This is what we need to get done. Go and do it." And one key thing too that I've done as a leader, but also one that follows somebody sometimes, I ask questions. So don't be afraid to ask questions. What do you expect from me? What is your expectation of this situation? How would you do it? And so there's a lot of communication that has to go into it. And if there's not communication between a leader and the people that are following them, then the whole system can break down.
One other question, drawing it back to home.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of, kids today may not have a positive role model at home. They may have a situation where the father's left or the mother, or they might be deceased.
Sure.
If they don't have that immediate parent or grandparent leadership person, authority figure, who do you recommend they reach out to in that situation if they're a teenager, young person, young adult?
Yeah, first and foremost, have a relationship with Jesus. That's where it all has to start. Find a Bible-believing church. One of the things that I truly have tried to model in my life is consistency. what people see away from the church is what they need to see while I'm in the church. So the first off, that relationship with Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith. But after that, a Bible-believing church, and just seek out people who live consistent, godly lives. That's what I would definitely recommend for any young person out there.
One thing we talked about today, and we'll draw it to a close with this, I mentioned in Hebrews, I did a sermon recently where it's from the actual last part of the chapter where it says we're to follow our leaders, but the idea was follow the faith of our leaders, but you don't place faith in the leaders themselves, because if you do, it becomes hero worship. If they fail, then there's a falling out. If they succeed, there's almost a tendency to put them on a pedestal. It's very difficult because that happens in organizations and churches. How do you help people to keep a balance with that?
Yeah, when I preach, and I make it very clear, I am transparent as much as possible, and I let people know that I am a flawed sinner saved by grace, and they need to always focus on Jesus and not on me. Anyone can grab a microphone and share. I am simply just a person being used by God, and so I always try to make it a point to not point it to me, but point it straight to Jesus every time. And even when people, say, hey, that's a great job, thank you for doing that, I humbly take that, but I always direct it exactly where it should go, right back to Jesus. Because you're exactly right. People can look at somebody and who may mess up and may fall, and they will walk away from church and maybe never come back because they kind of put that person on that pedestal. In reality, people in ministry, we are as human and as flawed as the next person, and we need the grace of God every single day. So I always try to direct it right back to where it needs to go, right to Jesus.
For you listening to this, if you have any questions on leadership, feel free to bring in questions or ideas you might have had. We'd love to get your feedback on this, and thank you again.